This week we're talking about fraudulent trucking companies and trucking scams. And how can you actually tell if a trucking company is legit? Sure, too. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens with myself, Darian Weems.
And Dawson, guys, welcome back.
Welcome back. Today we're talking about fraudulent trucking companies and really trucking scams. So let's dive into that. First, I think first and foremost, how the funny thing, we'll kind of give how it's going with us. It's been a couple weeks off, man. So how you been? What's going on?
So just to recap, we got Trump in presidency in about 7 months. A lot of crazy news, with tariffs, slowdowns. We're getting busier, are we not? And then, a lot of it is just news, right? And we just saw, one of the bigger companies, number one company, almost 100-year old, went down, which is something crazy to think about. Like, how does something like that happen, right? And usually by March or April, trucking picks up, right? Like, after the winter season and, a little bit of the slowdown, right? So this is after summer now that we're actually seeing trucking, the drayage, drive-in operations picking up, and that's part to, Prime Day coming up, reefer finally, the reefer business has picked up, right? But still, what happens is with have you seen those people being chased down in the fields in California?
You're talking about like the undocumented labor ICE kind of raid.
So those things have a big effect on, the reefer industry because those are the people that are working in the farms, right? And that kind of had another effect. Oh, and again, I'm just throwing some angles out there, right? That had some effect on the slowdown of the trucking business. But that's where our diversification kind of came into play, right? We were able to lean on the long haul for a little bit longer than we needed to, then back to the drayage, shifting our trucks back and forth, right? Where we saw, more demand from our customers, right? And yeah, I think right now we have more than we can handle. We're seeing a lot big demand. I think last week, usually we have what 250 vehicles. I think that went over probably 300 a day, which is, we have not seen that in a while. So, which is good for trucking industry. But yeah, what have you?
Well, just to piggyback on that, so a lot of like driver demand also, and the demand from the customers of the 100-year-old company that you know uh is going through very tough times. And really, I think all of us are going through tough times, but I was a little shocked to see that they were filing Chapter
Chapter
7
7?
there. Yeah, which to me is, pretty wild. And so, we're seeing a lot of their customers and, not just the brokers they work with, but like some of their direct customers. We're seeing a lot of their drivers and you know, capacity kind of reaching out to us, which is very interesting. And so it's been kind of crazy just going through this whole market. Like, your first go around for myself, for this to be the first go around is actually a very interesting dynamic, but it's like learning on the fly. It's like diving into the deep end, and just swimming, which has been spectacular. I've, grown a lot through this. This week we're talking about fraudulent trucking companies and trucking scams. And I think just before we get into this, I think this ties almost directly into a lot of the freight fraud that's happening right now that's kind of plaguing our industry, right? And so, I read some of the stories I was reading over the last couple weeks. It's really highlighting the way that these companies, kind of shut down, pick up, close shop, and they do it kind of in a very gray area way. They'll be, 50 trucking authorities operating out of the like same apartment complex. A lot of them will have like the same owner. Some of them won't like have legit insurance, right? And I think a lot of, these fraudulent trucking companies actually just make it a lot more difficult for companies that are doing things the right way, to be profitable, but then to also just like commit to doing things the right way. Like if everyone is, not everyone, but if there's a fair amount of people that are willing to undercut the rules in order to do things at cheaper rates, then it kind of affects the industry broadly. And I hope that as we've seen the transportation department come in and clean up and just start to enforce more rules, I hope we start to see them enforcing, rules that will kind of take out a lot of these kind of gray area fraudulent trucking companies. So
And what we've seen is during COVID, there were just, and this was one of the essential business, right, with healthcare. That created, while a lot of people were struggling and they had to shut their doors down, and maybe restaurants or other businesses, right? And I mean, a lot of people that were, had great jobs, great careers, and even healthcare, tech, IT, whatever, they left their industry to come into trucking.
it's crazy.
And and just to think about that, right? People with no experience in trucking getting it
Uh-huh.
because they just saw a crazy amount of money being made, like unheard of, right? Unheard numbers, right? And then that really kind of hurt the market a little bit on, especially on the long haul side of things, not so much of the drayage and what we do, right?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, still had a little effect on it. I guess that brought in a lot of people from other countries to get it how they could get into the trucking industry, how they can just be the middleman, how they can just
Uh-huh.
not really care about the rules and regulations. And again, we pay our taxes, we live here, and we care about our communities, we care about our families are on the road, not their families, people that are not here, right? So they might not really give a crap on safety and a lot of the things that we care about, compliance. Hundreds of trucking companies at one address, yeah, that's due to PO boxes, or all you need is an address to get a trucking authority. And I feel like, I mean, there's a rule like you can only have one company per your address, your physical address, not your PO box. And I definitely think the DOT and FMCS and these are they can strengthen their rules so that doesn't something like this does not happen. Or if you're using a PO box, right, there's a bunch of people there, but yeah, you should tag along with the physical address of that actual owner being in the United States, right?
Uh-huh.
So there's definitely the rules should be strict there for sure, and that will take out a lot of the bad fellas. I feel like.
I kind of agree, and that kind of guides segues us here into kind of the first question Alicia had for us, which was like, how can you actually tell if a trucking company is legit, right?
Mm, yeah.
So say you're a broker or a shipper, and companies are reaching out to you. Like, what are some of the things that maybe you should be looking for in a legit company to work with?
I definitely think it's good. Maybe a master class here, right? For a lot of maybe customers or brokers, right? I mean, the good ones, I mean, the experienced ones already know, right? First thing is just go to a company's website, right? Right off the bat, go all the way down, right? Go all the way down and see if these guys even match. Okay, all right. Let's just look at us, right? Our company. All right, let's just look at our address. Let's just look at our, see if what we can find on our company, right? So if you look, yeah, okay, these guys seems like they have their trucks. It's not fake, right? You can definitely tell if it's AI or fake. If you can't,
Uh-huh.
just take that picture and put it in AI and ask the AI, is this real or fake? And AI will tell
100%.
you if it's real or not, right?
100%.
Like, look, the article that we were reading on Friday was like freight fraud. Yeah, not until your freight vanishes and the trucking company ghosts on you is that realize that you made a mistake. No, you don't want that. You don't want, your customers freight going haywire, right? Yeah, but yeah, you could tell a lot by just looking at Google, looking at the company's reviews, looking at Safer, right? I mean, you the first couple of pages, you can just it doesn't even take no more than 2 minutes, right? Get a company, right? And then you go back on the website. All right, it seems like they got professional domain name, they got
Uh-huh.
professionals, right? USA phone numbers, right? Go to their social media, see if they got any kind of social media, go to WhatsApp. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's many ways to reach out to the company, right? I mean, the main thing that you should be doing is, right, if you go to Safer here, right? And majority of the brokers, and our customers, they do this, right? They call this number. So this number is tied up to our company
Uh-huh.
that, you can't fake this, right? So again, 2 years ago, somebody actually went on here, changed that number, redirected the calls to somebody else, and they were trying to fraud us. And right away we took action on it. And yeah, man, it's a crazy world. So you consistently, any trucking company should be making sure all of this is updated. So you know what brokers are doing now? If you change anything here, right, for 3 months they won't even want to give you loans because they think, hey, this could be, we don't. It's a red flag that they don't want to work with. But again, I still think there's not enough being done by our government, and our customers can do more, and then to take out these bad fellows out of.
Yeah. It's actually been interesting because in the past there was so much emphasis on the rules and regulations that just make it harder to do things the right way, EPA guidelines and green initiatives and things like that, you could argue help or hurt the industry. But, if there was just more emphasis on like rooting out the bad actors in the industry, I think it would just be a net positive, not just for the industry, but then also for, safety on the roads, right? And things of that nature. Just to kind of piggyback on what else you're saying, it's like this is something that we're working through right now and into Texas is like ensuring we have a physical yard space, ensuring that we have space for, customers to kind of come by and meet us or see our equipment, right? And I also think that having a decent social media presence actually helps out a ton because you know, is slightly interested if they do like like you're saying, that 1 minute Google search, they see all of the links, they click the links, they go to the website, and then they go on social media and maybe they've scrolled past some of our content or maybe they've seen some of it. But then they're like, oh, okay, these guys are pretty legit. Like, we could take the next steps in kind of in dealing with them. And I think that that's kind of ultimately, I think a good course of action, if you will, if you're somebody that's trying to figure out how legit a company is versus not. Um, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but um, you know, there was a stat pretty much saying that there's like 80% higher crash rates with these like what we'll call like ghost carriers. Um, and so do you think it's like just the ghost carriers doing things the wrong way that are leading to this, right? Maybe they're not doing like keeping up with their equipment, maybe they're not doing inspections, or is it just bad drivers?
So overall, a few factors there, right?
Yep.
One, majority of these guys are probably new into the game, quick in, quick out, right? Make the money. They're not here for the long run, or they're not, and they probably just got into. They were probably doing something else, and they've seen how people can make a lot of money in trucking, and then there's no money in trucking, and then now the only way to make money in trucking, they think, is, doing crime, right? So what are those crimes? Booking lows on, under a fake carrier and just stealing freight. And we've had run into some of these situations where a broker was doing that, right? A broker was definitely involved with the criminal organization, right? So the crashes, yeah, I would say the number one will be, inexperienced people, right? Hiring, drivers without even license. Isn't it crazy to think about? Somebody's driving a big rig truck without a commercial license.
Madness.
That is like, I think, if you look at the stats, it's like, over 100,000 or something, people, or whatever that number was. But crazy to think about, right?
Certainly scares me, bro. Like since I got into the industry, it's actually made me way more skeptical of every truck that I see on the highway, bro. Right? Like,
Yeah,
I do not drive anywhere near
I'll
these
be honest
trucks
with you,
now, right?
100. Because look at this, right? Like, we can do our part. We can change their tires when they're clearly close to the limit, right? Just imagine there's people driving out there, their tires are supposed to be changed, and that they could blow up at any time. What
Yes.
you want your family to be driving around in a truck next to, that you think, you know?
Yeah,
So
bro. And I tell my wife this, I'm like, babe, when you see one of these things on the like as far away as you possibly can, like because you have no way of knowing if they're doing things the right way, if the guy or gal has a freaking license, like how legit they are. And it's spooky. Again, it's crazy that, we've been focusing on the wrong types of rules and regulations.
Other thing is, what I've seen is the last few years, what the biggest change has been is social media. Okay, go back to ELDs. There's a big debate from people with them and against them, right? So whenever there's law changes, there's a lot of drawbacks. For example, when ELDs rolled around, how many drivers even had a tablet in their truck? How many drivers were even on their social media that much? Not very, right? So what happened is now you got a tablet mounted for a lot of carriers. Okay, some have AOBRDs, which are a little bit expensive, and not everybody can afford those high-end devices
Uh-huh.
that you cannot watch videos and stuff on. Majority of the carriers you'll see have tablets, right? And then what the drivers are gonna do, look, it's lonely. Look, to be honest, what kudos to drivers that are on the road away from their families. And that's where you're seeing the average truck driver age is what, like 50 something, 55, 58. The next generation doesn't even want to get into trucking. So so again, it's a lonely road. What are they gonna do? Just gonna watch videos. Again, this is you should not be, right? But how are you going to stop these drivers?
They gotta enforce the rules, man. They gotta, like I saw,
All the companies out there, we
yeah,
won't enforce it, but
well, I saw Adam talking about this. He posted something on Twitter talking about how there were like a guy was talking about his team driver, and he was essentially saying his team driver never stopped at the way stations because he was like a sovereignty thing. He's like, I'm not stopping at the way stations because they don't have the right to stop me, right? And he just drives past all the way stations and like
which Adam,
doesn't
which Adam,
doesn't Adam, we met with him earlier in the year. Compliance. I can't remember his last name. Adam starts with like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
maybe
okay,
a
okay,
W.
yeah.
Um, but he actually has a ton of great content around this stuff, and it's been great following him. And he posts pretty much every day, yeah, about these types of issues. And I was a big thing. He's like, yeah, he posts like a screenshot of a guy texting someone talking about how the guy never stops at the way stations, and no one ever comes to pull him over, right? Usually, when the trucks drive past the way station, police are supposed to drive out there, pull that guy over, and like do
Usually
the
have
inspection.
one or two officers there, right?
Hmm.
Until it's like a big scale, like there's just a few of them in California. Some it's crazy to think about. Some drivers just disregard the rules and they just don't care.
Yeah. I think, we kind of talked a little bit about kind of fake address stories. There's the whole thing of like why anyone would risk a FMCSA violation just to fake an address. But I think that's kind of, it's a given. It's like people are trying to undercut and make more money, right? They're trying to cheat the industry, cheat the other carriers, right? Cheat the brokers, cheat the shippers, and do things in just a bad faith way. Actually, this morning while I was kind of doing my Twitter thing, I see there's like maybe it's like Freight Caviar or something, but they're interviewing this Serbian guy, right? And he's like in Europe smoking a cigarette, and he's like, yeah, I think we messed up the United States trucking market. Like, I think we messed it up. I think ultimately, because we don't care and we're not focused on doing things the right way. And he said a lot of the problems in that industry probably come from us. And then he's like slow smoking a cigarette, like a freaking movie or something. I just think it's interesting. I'm not really, yeah, we need to have more enforcement of the rules. I think if we enforced the heck out of the rules for like a year, we would see a remarkable improvement, not just in safety, but also in rates and in, like the service quality of the industry overall, because it would just root out a lot of bad carriers, a lot of bad drivers, a lot of bad brokers, right? A lot of brokers that are doing things the wrong way also, who are out and dispatching guys that they know are over their hours of service and forcing them to do things right. And so there's just a ton of low-hanging fruit if we only enforce the rules that are like on the books today, right? We don't need any new rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the second one is fraudulent tow truck scams in California. Why are tow truck scams suddenly exploding in California, or just bad luck or a bigger problem? I mean, the tow truck scams, if you're talking about, when a truck breaks down and, the authorities, they want to clear the freeway and traffic. I mean, they're raced against time. So they're already tied up with a bunch of towing companies in the area that are ready to roll, and then that they'll get premium just to be on standby. That's why you see a lot of the high, insurance costs there for tow truck, prices there. But there's another issue going on out more on the East Coast when you can just, you're parking on the street or nearby a warehouse, and then these tow guys are coming in. They just give me tickets, or they're towing your truck, or and then they want $3,000. So there's a lot of stuff like that going on. So again, people just capitalizing on you know loophole, or a few years ago, or even now in New York. If you keep a truck running for over 5 minutes, there's this guy that made like $70,000 in a year just waiting for a truck to just record him for 5 minutes. 6 minute, he'll complain to the government or the New York City state, whatever, and he was getting confiscated partial of that ticket. So again, somebody figures way out,
That's
and
crazy.
he took advantage of it, and though he got a lot of hate for it, but just look at somebody that played the system and made money. So there's a lot of that, over the years that you will you know hear about. There's gonna a lot of people. People think there's so much money in trucking, right? Insurance companies, mechanics, dealers, finance companies. So everybody is making money. Just look at the business as it itself. How many people are relying on the trucking industry, right?
The whole country.
It's like healthcare, AI, trucking, supply chain. It's moving the world, right?
Well, I guess that's we'll keep this one pretty light today because we got to double up this week, so we don't want to burn ourselves out here. But I think in closing, I think, when thinking about fraudulent trucking companies and entities, it's like I don't even really have much to say about it because I'm just so focused on doing shit the right way, Like I'm like so laser focused. Like you can ask, anyone listening can ask Tal or can, anyone on my team. It's like I am number one thing in my mind is like, hey guys, we have to do things the right way. We have to be in compliance. We have to like be safe. We have to ensure that like we are never putting someone on the road that like can't handle it and manage it, which is, luckily for us, we're not in that situation because we've had a lot of our drivers for a very long time and they're all very good. And uh, you know, making sure the equipment is good and then making sure that ultimately, like I said, like we are locked down just from a compliance perspective. So like I don't really have a lot of like, you know,
Yeah,
about these guys. Yeah.
when you're looking at the news, right, majority of it's negative news, and that's people are just wired, and then for us it's like wired in positive news, like looking at the doing it the right way, becoming world class. So we're gonna see positive news. So if you're looking at negative news, the algorithm is gonna feed you negative news. You know, it's just how the algorithm works. It's gonna feed you what you want to consume, right? So I definitely think trying to share good stories, positive stories is something, again, like when we started this YouTube thing, where we wanted to put content out there for our customers, for our drivers, and people to kind of know who we are, what we want to build here, and if you want to be a part of it, and no wonder why drivers are retaining, with us 5+ years on average, right? There's a reason. We take good care of our staff and our drivers, and they want to work with us. Again, if you keep doing the right thing, and then there's positive vibes around, our team. I guess maybe that's it. But yeah, I mean, you can add on there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, do things the right way. And then, if you are a serious shipper, a serious broker, like don't undercut, don't like, is saving that extra money really worth it? Tao, how many times have you been dealing with a customer and they're like, not too expensive, we're going to go in a different direction, only for them to come back because they realize that they're
Right. And that's
dealing
okay.
with one of
Not
these.
everybody's gonna work with us and our rate, and you can try those other cheaper carriers out there, and then just know that you're not gonna get that world class, after just this new account that we picked up, Eddie account, with the customer, pretty happy customer. But yeah,
Spectacular. Well, yeah, well, Tal, any thoughts on the week here? Because this is usually we record these at the end of the week, so we got a whole week coming, and then we'll do another one here later this week to kind of get back on track. But like, any thoughts on the week? What's on your mind this week, man?
I know things have picked up after the summer, I think we're gonna be have a pretty busy week. So, which is good. Then you don't know the time flies, right? And you want to stay busy. But yeah, I mean, what about you? Anything on your mind? I know we got the Texas expansion going on, guys. So you'll see our more of our trucks this year into Texas, and for our customers, they're doing to us. And I think we already have a big list of customers that want our trucks out there. It's crazy to think about, right? Texas expanding, and then they can't find good carriers out there.
Yeah, well, it's because the supply and demand dynamics are just off. It's just a tighter market there for carriers because there's more freight happening kind of in the we'll call it the heart of Texas there, more manufacturing capacity, more stuff coming up from cross-border trade. And from the customers that we've talked to, and you're right, like we do have, we reached out to a bunch of customers, some brokers, some shippers that are doing kind of that have operations there, and they're like, yeah, we would love, like, let us know as soon as you're operational there because, we have needs that are not being filled. And so, that's the thing that I'm focused on ultimately is like trying to build new accounts out there in Texas. And so a lot of my energy has been ensuring the expansion kind of goes well, just from like a paperwork compliance perspective, but then also engaging customers so that they know we're going to be there, and so that whenever we get there, we have work waiting for us, and then B, starting to forge new relationships and kind of new service models, frankly, there. And so that's really my big thing. Cool. And blase